The White Sox announced a bunch of moves yesterday, and while there's a logical reason to bring back Luis Robert Jr., there's also reasons why it looks foolish.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I've been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then. And also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, I'm going to get to Martin Perez declining his mutual option being a bit of a surprise after I discussed the White Sox hiring Zach Bove as the new pitching coach, actually being a good way to tap into the Royals system. But first, let's discuss the three ways the White Sox exercising Luis Robert Jr.'s option looks foolish despite there being a rational reason to bring him back. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. All right, so it was no surprise that the White Sox exercised Luis Robert Jr.'s option. General Manager Chris Getz made it clear as the season was wrapping up, he was bringing back LRJ. And there are rational reasons to bring him back, despite him having another subpar season at the plate. That's now 2 years in a row where he has struggled at the plate after being an all-star in 2023. The rational reasons, obviously, he can still crush left-handed pitching consistently. He can cause havoc on the bases. When he does get on base, he can still pop a homer here and there. But most importantly, he can still play in elite defensive center field. And when you look at the alternatives the White Sox have to be the opening day starter in center field next March of 2026 in Milwaukee, well, yeah, Luis Robert Jr. is your best bet because the options, the alternatives, not great, Bob. Do you really want to see Brooks Baldwin trying to chase down fly balls? I mean, obviously it would be cheaper, but when it comes to what Luis Robert Jr. can still bring to the table, it's still okay. I see why they did it. It still makes sense to roll the dice one more time to see if Luis Robert Jr. can reclaim his 2023 version of himself. And if that can happen, he can be flipped at the trade deadline for a much better package of prospects that will help this rebuild. However, that is actually part of the three reasons it still looks foolish to bring him back. And I'm just putting it in the context of optics because you could agree with it or not. It is what it is. I'm at the point where I would have preferred to move on. I've made that clear. I was in support, obviously, last offseason of rolling the dice one more time to bring back Luis Robert Jr., but I'm just at the point where that version of that 2023 version of him is gone. You're not going to get that trade package, and that's one of the reasons why Chris Getz bringing him back is looking foolish because I think he's pursuing this trade package that it'll never be there. And it also looks foolish to exercise his option because Luis Robert is only worth $20 million to the White Sox and the White Sox only. And that continues to be a problem for this organization, that players shouldn't have this type of value to them when they're not at that type of value. They keep doing it. They keep overvalued players. They keep paying them. And that's the other thing. They should have never have paid them before. But that's the previous administration that did that. And finally, I would say actually it looks somewhat foolish to keep him because maybe it's just time to close the chapter on that previous rebuild failing. And Luis Robert Jr., he's that last link to that frustrating era. But as I've said before, the only reason why I'm sort of okay with Luis Robert Jr. getting a $5 million raise, despite a 223, 297, 364 slash line, 14 homers, and an 84 WRC plus, is I would still rather have him in center field with his 7 outs above average than Brooks Baldwin. He's going to help at least prevent runs when he's available. And I think you can only bank on him being available, the past 2 years of injuries, 100 games. This is at least not like 2021 where he played like 88 games, or 2022 when he was, I think, again, playing under 100 games. You can basically pencil him in for about 100, 110 games. And despite the low slash line, the defense, the ability to swipe bases, hitting lefties, and, there's stretches where he will play really well he will hit really well at the plate. that does equal up to a 1.3 F4 player this past season. And that at least raises the talent floor. But again, you are overpaying for a raised talent player right now. That's what he is. He raises your talent floor. That's who he is right now in the context. He's not that 2023 version. I mean, Fangraphs' production to value conversion had his 2025 season earning around $10.2 million. In 2024, it was $4.4 million. So even if you added up, what he's done combined, it's still not worth $20 million. But the reason why the White Sox can eat that cost is they only had Andrew Benintendi's $17.1 million contract. Again, overvaluing a player on the books. So they can absorb the cost. But I can't see any other team in baseball paying Luis Robert Jr. $20 million. Not even the talent, even the more talent efficient Rockies. I don't see them paying Luis Robert Jr. that much. I mean, you just saw the Chicago Cubs turn down Shota Imanaga's option despite 2 straight sub-4 ERAs and finishing the top 5 of the NL Cy Young in 2024 because he had a bad September. He started to become a bad fit. Even the Cubs were like, I'm not giving him $56 million the next couple of years in terms of that convoluted extent, option that they had because he gets hit. He's a fly ball pitcher in a fly ball ballpark. Now he's been good at limiting it, but you saw in September, the ball was starting to fly out on him. So they said, see ya, even though, had good production. Some teams recognize the potential for regression isn't worth the investment of any more time and money. And the White Sox give those guys a raise. And they do it because, one of the reasons is right now they don't have a better viable option for opening day. Now, top prospect Braden Montgomery might be able to take over center field in mid-2026 or 2027. Although, again, I still feel like he's going to be more of a right fielder. And Chris Getz even said it's not like they're going to be spending gobs of cash in free agency to address center field to find a replacement. This is what he said per Scott Merkin. I have this up for those watching on YouTube. Scott Merkin tweeted this out at Scott Merkin. Getz, free agency is an avenue to bring in players to help in the win total, but to go beyond this upcoming season, I think it would be a little premature considering the state of our club right now and the development of these young players. One more from Getz. We will be active. To what extent is yet to be seen. Free agency is just about to really kick off, and we'll get an idea of what the market is. But we do know where we have areas we want to improve, and they are different in different ways to do it. One of them is free agency, end quote. Not exactly a guy who's heck bent on spending a lot of money. Now, the other reason why I believe Getz is heck bent on getting the 2023 trade value for Luis Robert Jr. is just frustrating and maddening to me because it's long gone. Here's what 670 The Score's Bruce Levine tweeted out. I've got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube. This is at MLB Bruce Levine. Chris Getz says he expects Luis Robert Jr. to be a part of the 2026 team after picking up his $20 million option. Multiple teams are still interested in trading for Robert. White Sox will not settle for lesser talent in return. He's got to stop with this. Chris Getz just has to stop. Last offseason and the trade deadline, they didn't meet that high price. Last offseason, teams did not want to give up to the top 5 prospects because of the fear of him being injury prone. And guess what? He got injured and struggled for most of the 2025 season. And again, at the trade deadline, the contenders screamed back. He was a rental to them. They were not going to pay he's still talented and he was great in 2023 return Getz was seeking. And now he's making $5 million more. And I doubt any team is going to give up premium prospects. Now, can you still get a top 30 prospect? Sure. Austin Slater flashed one. However, he was making next to nothing. So the White Sox are likely going to have to pay down some salary and hope like heck a contender like Philadelphia or the Mets have an injury in the offseason and get desperate. Because that's the only reason I see him not being the center fielder on opening day. He's going to be on the roster. I just don't see teams, paying up. And again, I know 670 Scores Lawrence Holm made the point. It just might be time to move on and close the chapter on that failed rebuild. And just thinking that, Luis Robert Jr. has a talent. Let's give it another shot. It might be time to move on. Well, the White Sox officially announced the new pitching coach. I'll discuss why after the break. I'm not worried that they brought in Zach Bove from the Royals. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. And if you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, Georgia, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And I love how simple of a concept PrizePicks is. Pretty much, if I think a player's going to have a great game, I just pick the more option on the player projection. If I think the player's going to stink, I just go with the less option. The new stacks feature, that's a game changer too. You can now pick more on, say, a superstar player like Steph Curry's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch a show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe at wherever you get your audio podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me, and maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com and on TapSportsNet.com. And again, just to cycle back, obviously they're now not moving on because they've exercised the option with Luis Robert Jr., but there could have been some value for the White Sox to just kind of officially close that chapter on last decade's rebuild failing by just paying him to go away. Now, I get it, and I've argued that the asset status, you still might want to keep that. So, as I said, at the end of the day, I get it. It is what it is, but it's the optics of, again, bringing back a guy who, yes, he had a little bit of a hot stretch before he got injured, but, the market has been screaming back. This is what we're paying. It's not, and I think that's the other thing. Chris Getz is just saying, well, teams are trying to lowball me, basically, is how he's always communicated it, in the way that I interpret it. No, they're telling you, dude, he's only valuable to you. To us, maybe he's a starting center fielder and he's a complementary piece. To you, he's a valuable player, and that's just not the case anymore. Well, anyways, the White Sox, they've earned every bit of scrutiny and ridicule. So hiring Zach Bove from the Royals did get some snickers from the skeptics in the fan base. I saw a lot of tweets out there and a lot of folks, saying, here we go again, tapping into the Royals. Why are we doing that? I mean, have we not learned our lesson from Pedro Grifol and that historically awful 2024 White Sox season that had a bunch of former Royals on it? Remember, the joke was Chris Getz just kept bringing back in, guys he was familiar with, former Royals players from the bad Royals too. Not like the ties to the good Royals. But Bove has been with the Royals when things have been getting better in Kansas City. So that's why I kind of push back on here we go again with the Royals. Also, remember, the Royals have been winning lately with their pitching. So to get somebody that has helped them put together a pretty good pitching staff, I'm fine with him. Also, from just reading up on him, he's a forward-thinking mind who embraces, technology and analytics to help develop his pitchers. And considering this next season is about internal improvement, I'm fine with the White Sox hiring the director of Major League Pitching Strategy and assistant pitching coach for the Kansas City Royals. And, on its surface, yes, he's been with the Royals, but he's also been part of other organizations like the Twins and the Blue Jays. So he's at least diversified himself. And the Twins, they've always been a good pitching organization too. And if he's into pitch development and analytics, he should work nicely with Brian Bannister, who's also a forward-thinking, pitching guy in terms of, a baseball mind. And he is the director of pitching for the White Sox. And Chris Getz said when the hire was made, it was very, it was a collaborative effort. So obviously Bannister, if he's on board, I trust the hire. And this fits into the team wanting to make sure they had someone who could help the arms develop, not just we got to bring in Will Venable's guy. And while we can ridicule Chris Getz again for loving to hire people with his ties to the Royals, you guys got to remember the Royals have made the playoffs in 2024, and they went 82-80 this past season. They're actually now a good organization. They're not a dumpster fire like they were in 2023. Like, yes, when they hired Pedro Grifol, I was like, why are you tapping into the Royals? Their championship days were long gone. Why are we bringing Pedro Grifol in? And, again, playoff appearance in 2024 and an 82-80 record, we'd be killing for that right now. So we can't really just totally hold our noses at, here we go with the Royals. Folks, our team has lost 100 games for 3 straight seasons. We're the train wreck. The Royals are actually a much more functional organization. And they've also done it with really good pitching. They were 9th in team ERA this past season with a 3.73 number, 12th in FIP with a 4.01 figure. The Royals were 20th in the league in expected FIP. So you can see they're actually getting more out of their pitchers than expected. And in 2024, the Royals were 3rd in ERA and 4th in FIP. And it was put together by a mix of development, signing also free agents, and that's how the Royals were built into a good pitching staff. And it sounds like Bove played a huge role in helping the teams develop their pitching. KC Starr, Royals beat writer, Jalen Thompson, he tweeted this, and I got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube. This is at Jalen Thompson. Zach Bove played a big role in developing several young #Royals pitchers. Now he will look to do the same in Chicago. And then Royals play-by-play announcer Jake Eisenberg had this to say on X, formerly Twitter, and I have this up for those watching on YouTube. Zach Bove was consistently lauded by both pitchers he worked with and his fellow coaches for his efforts in improving the Royals pitching staff, and always gracious with his time and helping us understand the how and why of those improvements. Congrats to Zach and his family. That's at Jake Eisenberg. And here's what MLB.com's Ann Rogers wrote about Bove's work with the Royals pitchers back in 2023. Connecting data and feel is an overarching theme in the Royals camp this year. Pitching coach Brian Sweeney and the club hired Bove to be its director of Major League Pitching Strategy, assistant pitching coach, a position heavy on analytics, especially pitch design. What Bove helped Lynch with last week and several other pitchers so far this spring is exactly why the Royals hired him. Creative ideas that help unlock success. Quote, when I'm looking right, he's looking left, Sweeney said. Bove is a guy that when he turned to the pitching side, he dove in and learned a lot. He's like a Swiss Army knife. He's able to be the strategist, dive into the data. We ask the questions, he'll dive in, and then we can discuss it. He's got great ideas, end quote. Unlike Sweeney, a former major league pitcher and coach, Bove's route to the big league coaching staff hasn't been traditional. A hitter in college, Bove got his coaching start as a hitting coach at the College of Central Florida. When head coach Marty Smith made a pitching coach change in 2024, he turned to Bove to fill the role. Without a ton of prior pitching experience, Bove took on the challenge of connecting with pitchers and helping them improve. Bove turned to the data, which was beginning to revolutionize professional baseball. He began to dive into technology and baseball-specific training in developing pitchers. Quote, it just gave a really objective lens, Bove said. Subjectivity is really important having experience, but I couldn't rely on that. Hey, this is what I did as a player. I was a young coach with mainly a hitting background, I said. Hey, let me dive in and see what's the most objective way to measure things, and then blend that with a subjective piece and use it to track progress, end quote. Bove has impressed Royals pitchers so far with his cerebral approach and laid-back demeanor. They've enjoyed getting to know him through early conversations about their goals and now in-depth conversations about ideas to improve. Quote, he and all of the coaches have been very receptive, Chris Getz said. You can tell he wants to know who we are as pitchers. Then all of his ideas have been great, end quote. Bove emphasizes this process, a team effort with the player at the forefront. His job, he said, is to meet the player where they're at in terms of information gathering, technology usage, and understanding of pitch design. So I love how he can bring a process to helping these young pitchers get better, because that's got to happen next season. Shane Smith has to go from stud pitcher to ace pitcher. Sean Burke, with his improved velocity, has to get back to being a solid rotation arm. Mike Vassell can't regress. Grant Taylor and Jordan Leisure, they got to get better in high leverage situations out of the bullpen. And in the case of Taylor, possibly being a starter. And then you got a couple of more young flamethrowers coming up that will have to learn the big league game, like Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, and Tanner McDougal. And Brian Bannister, he just can't do it all. So I like that they brought in another forward-thinking mind who's embracing the modern way of developing pitchers. And again, this shows why the White Sox moved on from Ethan Katz, because they wanted to get a better tutor in the show, not just give Will Venables guy. And once they officially announced Derek Showman as the hitting coach, I'll tackle his hiring. As right now, it has been confirmed by SoxMachine.com's James Fegan, and I got a feeling the White Sox probably want to give Bovey his day, so they'll probably announce him as a hitting coach probably later today. And in terms of other news, the Sox announced Martin Perez declined his $10 million mutual option. And I'm sort of surprised by that, and I'll discuss why after the break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And I'm always telling you about how fun it is to play FanDuel's traditional money lines, the over-unders, and the spreads. But if you want to win some big-time money or at least double or triple your cash, play FanDuel's props, parlays, or futures. So, for example, you think Chicago can ride this hot start to a surprising 50-plus win season? Well, that is at plus 430 the last time I checked. So you got a chance to quadruple your money if that happens. Let's say you're going to, though, be more realistic and build a parlay of Chicago having more than 40 wins and making the play-in game, like they normally do. Well, that is going off at plus 308 the last time I checked. So there's a chance to triple your money if that happens. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. All right, so I'm not surprised Martin Perez is a free agent. I am surprised, though, that the White Sox were not the reason Perez is officially a free agent. I figured Perez would at least exercise his side of the $10 million mutual option, and it would be the White Sox declining their side. And the only reason I figured Perez would do it is I don't see him getting $10 million from any other team in Major League Baseball. Now, maybe he's doing the White Sox a solid, as he did say he wanted to return next season. He's made it clear a bunch of times he would love to come back next season. And the only way he could take a pay cut from $10 million is through free agency, because there's no way you're going to pay a pitcher who made just 10 starts and 11 appearances because of an elbow injury $10 million. Yeah, his numbers were fine and they were solid, but that major injury where he basically missed pretty much the entire summer, you're not going to give him $10 million, especially since he's also going to be 35 on opening day and doesn't throw massive heat out there either. And Spot Track projects he could get like a $5 million deal. Basically what he got for this past season. He got a $3.5 million base, and by declining the option, he gets a $1.5 million buyout. So maybe he gets another type of deal. And I doubt the union would agree to let him sign an extension for less than $10 million, because the White Sox could have agreed to a lesser payout for next season if they did want to bring him back. But the union has to agree, and we've never seen the union say, yeah, we'll take less money. So obviously he might be doing the White Sox a solid to come back at maybe another $5 million. And again, the only way he can do that is he has to decline and become a free agent. And I wouldn't be opposed to rolling the dice on him again to see if he can actually stay healthy and still pitch effectively. He provided leadership to the young rotation even while hurt. So most of those guys, usually when they have that type of major elbow injury and they're rehabbing, they usually either go down to the spring training facility or go, wherever they need to go to feel comfortable. He stayed in the clubhouse. He was around the team, seemed to enjoy his time. And while obviously it seems clear the White Sox are not going to be spending a ton of money in free agency, they do need to, at least, I believe, add a couple of free agent starters. They definitely need at least one, again, to show, because you're going to be bringing up, hopefully, fingers crossed, Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith and Tanner McDougal, hopefully at some point, or Shane Murphy too, at some point next season. You do need to have someone that can show these guys the way. I mean, Davis Martin has a full season and then a couple of starts before that Tommy John surgery. And Shane Smith has a full season, but not exactly guys that can be like, hey, I've been through the battles. They've only been through the battles one time. They don't always have a ton of tricks to share. So they still need a veteran. So I'm not opposed to it being Martin Perez, but they do need to make sure that they have a couple of spots open so that they're not blocking Shane Smith and Noah Schultz. And I would like the White Sox to maybe get a better starting pitcher in free agency. And if they can do that, do it. If you can get a better pitcher, I keep saying go shop in the bargain bin section at least. If you can get a better starting pitcher at, say $7 to $10 million, I would go for it. Although Dustin May might be a decent reclamation project to look at. And again, I'm not totally opposed to them even, kicking the tires on some of those pitchers in the KBO or Japan that can come over. I'm not going to be totally opposed to it either. But in terms of how many they need to fill, in terms of veterans, at the bare minimum, you need one. And again, if you can get something better than Perez, I would say get better, something better than Perez. Because again, I keep saying it, I know I sound like a broken record, but you can only pencil in Shane Smith and Davis Martin into the rotation. And I think you got to give Burke every opportunity to win a spot. So let's say that's 3. You definitely then need some spots open for eventually if Tanner McDougal and Shane Murphy arrive before Schultz and Hagen Smith, or do you bring them out of the pen? What about Grant Taylor? There's so many things. But I would just prefer that they maybe secure a more quality starter to eat up innings than Perez, again, who's coming off an injury that was thought to be career-ending. So that's another reason why I know it's semantics, but that's just why I was a little bit surprised that it was actually Perez who was the one that initiated becoming a free agent, than the Sox forcing him to basically go that route. But we'll see if he does come back. They also need a lefty in the rotation. That's another thing. Right now, Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz probably are not going to be ready by opening day. So are you going to roll the dice on Shane Murphy? He's got the numbers. He's an off-speed guy, though. So that'll be interesting to see. What do they do? Because you would like to have at least one southpaw in your rotation. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with hopefully talk about the White Sox officially naming Derek Showman as the team's hitting coach. Again, as I'm recording this right now, they have not officially hired it, though it has been confirmed by James Fegan of Sox Machine. And I believe someone in a Marlins beat reporter, I thought I saw that on X, formerly Twitter, confirmed it. But I don't want to tackle it until they officially announce it, so we can officially get some sound, get some quotes, that type of stuff, kind of like what I did today. So that's why I did not tap into Showman's hiring. I'll definitely get more in depth into Chris Getz's comments on free agency and the spending that the team will do. I do want to tackle your mailbag questions and comments, since I did not get to it on Tuesday, since I had Dylan Barnes on the show yesterday. And since I didn't do a way back Wednesday today, I'm going to try to do a throwback Thursday tomorrow. And in terms of making sure your mailbag questions and comments, make sure to get those in to LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com, or you can leave them on X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox or @ToddJDub. Also, feel free to leave comments about today's episode on the YouTube page via email, LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com, or on X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox or @ToddJDub. Also, make sure to like today's episode on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review at wherever you get your audio podcasts. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel @LockedOnWhiteSox or wherever you get your audio-only podcasts. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.